with the idea of borrowing from Jewish and Christian sources, I was discussing the Kathisma Church. Now, I spoke with Odon recently, oddly enough, and he's like, look, well, Kathisma actually means this, and the association with Moses means that, and I mean that's not irrelevant, but it's not relevant to this point because Muslims didn't really necessarily care what something meant. They didn't necessarily understand. They would just grab it because it seemed good, and they would jam it in there, right, to make their soup.
Yeah.
And what the mystical meaning was for the Jews isn't necessarily what Muslims understood about it. But the fact is that I think they needed to borrow certain elements to justify their religion, which they wanted to parallel with Christian beliefs. And as we know, that in the early period, Christianity was still somewhat Jewish in its expression. There was a very strong sort of messianic Jewish flavor to it, rather than necessarily strictly Christian flavor, which developed over some time. Kathisma Church means the seat. Now, within the Bible, there's the tale of Mary and Joseph. They're walking, and Mary gets very tired riding on the donkey, and she needs to sit down, and she sits down on a rock. And this rock is supposed to be a rock which is about 4 kilometers from, it's halfway between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. It's outside Jerusalem on the road, quite literally on the road to Jerusalem. And so this rock is supposed to be a particular rock, which was the site of the Kathisma Church. Now, the Kathisma Church was built in 456, which is 5 years after of a particular council, which, well, we'll get to that. But prior to that, it seems that this particular rock or this particular site has a well. It definitely has a well. It had drawn, and also it's within the Old Testament. It's also a very important site. So it's got long-standing history with a very strong attachment to the Old Testament, to the Jewish tradition, and thus to the Christian tradition, and it drew pilgrims, and pilgrims would be guaranteed to walk past this location. So whether this is the specific rock or a rock 200 meters down the road, who knows? But this was the rock that was chosen as the one where Mary sat down. This is supposed to be that rock. Now, of course, we don't know for sure which rock she sat down at. I mean, we don't have the Google map pin for that, but she sat down somewhere, right? And this was the place, and it was a site where pilgrims went to get water. But first, potentially prior to it becoming a church and the seat of Mary, it was supposed to be the first, according to at least some scholars, the first nativity site before that was moved to Bethlehem. So, and
just
then,
want to,
yeah, sure.
Just wanted to point out that you're still on slide 1, so I think it might be.
Yes, I know.
Oh no, yeah. Just in case. Oh yeah, sorry, just making sure it was working.
Yeah, no, I know I'm on slide 1, so I'm just giving the story. So I don't.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just in case. No.
Now notice this is from one of my readers on one of the commenters, one of the subs. He says the prominence of Mary in Islam makes no sense because her only claim of significance is that to Christians she is the mother of God. Now, Islam argues against the divinity of Jesus, so why would they continue to revere Mary if not as some sort of theological fossil from their Christian origins? What do you think of that, Mel?
Yeah, there's definitely a contradiction in the focus on Mary. Yeah, I think that makes good sense.
Right,
Just
and I mean,
point
Muhammad
to an
isn't
origin.
born miraculously, although he is in the Sirah, but then you've got Jesus who is sinless, Jesus born miraculously. It's just kind of like, huh, okay. Now, Shoemaker thinks that the Cathisma was the original nativity shrine, which later moved to Bethlehem. Now, the church was built much later, so Bethlehem then becomes the new nativity shrine, but this place is remembered as a sacred place because hundreds of pilgrims would go past it, and then the church was then repurposed. So in 456, when the church is built, right, it becomes the seat of Mary rather than the nativity shrine, but it's remembered as a holy location. So the location is technically the location is repurposed, right? And it's the first and earliest known Christian shrine in Jerusalem to be appropriated by Muslims. Now, isn't that odd? The first and earliest known Christian shrine. Why didn't they take the Temple Mount? Why this place outside of Jerusalem? Why would the Muslims take this place? It's odd. Okay, so Shoemaker confirms that the Cathisma was the model for the Dome of the Rock, and other sources confirm as well. This church, the octagonal design of this church, was the model used as the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is copied after the style of this particular church. Why would they copy the Dome of the Rock? Why would the Dome of the Rock be built in the style of a church dedicated to Mother Mary? That makes no sense. Was the dome originally a Marian shrine? Right? And there are at least 5 major connections to this particular site, to this location, historically and with the Old Testament. So this place is a source for Islamic tradition, one that is not created in Mecca, but one that was made in Jerusalem, because this thing is so rich with history and tradition. And the palm tree in the church that we have here, this palm tree is an Islamic palm tree. The Muslims added this. Sorry.
I've lost you there.
So this palm tree that was added here, this was added by the Muslims. This is not a Christian design. This palm tree, because palm trees, notice you've got the ajwa dates here. You've got palm trees in the background, and you've got this palm tree, which is also part of the Islamic story, where Mother Mary sits down, right? The tree bends. So Jesus speaks to the tree from her stomach, right? And the tree bends down to shade her and to give her dates to eat, right? Within the Islamic context. And also so the story is that a spring, miraculous spring, breaks out from the rock, from the soil. And of course, there she has water to drink. And this whole story with this thing is that it gives sweet water to pilgrims. Now, the palm tree in the church is part of the Islamic conversion to a mosque. It's an Islamic palm tree mosaic at an ancient nativity shrine. And on top of that, there's a time it was when Muslims and Christians prayed together in this church before the Muslims eventually took it over and made it into a mosque. So just the multitude of different connections here. Your thoughts, Mel?
Yeah, I think that last bit is very significant because it speaks to the idea that Islam and Christianity were an awful lot closer in the early couple of centuries.
Yes.
And actually, a little bit later in the live stream, I'm going to be giving evidence from a Chinese source from 751, which backs up that very point. So, I think it's an interesting convergence there.
So I'll run through this. So this is my second run through. So I'm still trying to refine all this. But notice this is the design of the Kathisma Church, octagonal, double-walled, with a ring in the middle with the rock. This is the design of the Dome of the Rock from 200 plus years later, almost 200 something, 225 years later, double-walled octagon with a circle with a rock in the middle. And then, of course, you've got the story in Islam where a portion of the rock is broken and taken away. Well, a portion of this rock was broken and taken away as well.
Yeah. I was just going to say there, it just at first glance, obviously I know that this is the Church of the Cathisma, but if someone were to show me that simple image on its own without any labels, I would assume it's Dome of the Rock that you're showing me. That's how close it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and now notice it was once nearly as important as the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, but it was forgotten. Yeah. It got destroyed and literally covered. Now, isn't it odd? They made it disappear.
Yeah. Well, that's like another skeleton in Islam's closet that they would rather people forget about. So I can totally understand why they would want to wipe that off the map.
I mean, it was found 30 years ago. Oddly enough, it's been like exactly 30 years since they found it.
Yeah.
Since it resurfaced. So yeah. So so the southern apse at one point was made into a mosque. Okay. So this is north. So the southern apse, you're looking at this section here. You're looking at a piece over here somewhere. Right, was made into a mosque in the first half of the 8th century. The rest of the structure continued to be used as a church until eventually the Muslims took it over. So somewhere here is a prayer niche, a Muslim prayer niche. So I think it's this piece here. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's that piece here. So there's definitely a connection between Islam and Christianity at this church, and this also confirms some of what Donner says as well. So there's some interesting overlap there. Scholars hold the church was destroyed in 614, but I found at least 3 episodes of destruction. In the 800s, in the 8th century, so the 7th century, the 8th century, as well as in the 12th century or 11th century.
Yeah.
Until it was buried. And so it's just odd that the Dome of the Rock is copied after the style of it. So the style of this church was very specific because it was meant to look different to all the other churches because it was devoted to Mary, to the Mother of God, right? So very odd. Now,
Can I just ask, before you go into this, do you know anything about the destruction of the church those 3 times, whether any time was to do with earthquakes or was by human hand?
I believe they claim human hands. So they got the Persian invasion in 614 when they
Yeah.
took over Jerusalem. Then I think the Muslims might have destroyed it. Then it was rebuilt, and then I think the Templars may have the Templars destroyed it. I believe in the eighth. No, then the Templars may have destroyed it, or it was destroyed just after the Templars were defeated. There's not exactly a clear story there, but
Yeah.
so
Okay.
the Muslims made it to mosque, and the Templars destroyed it, or the Templars took it back from the Muslims. When the Templars left, the Muslims destroyed it. So I'm not sure which story is true
Yeah.
here. It's a bit
Okay.
fuzzy.
Yeah.
But it was definitely buried. It was made to disappear. That's my thinking.
Yeah. That's interesting, Neil. Yeah.
And the church would have had a dome. It's not very uncommon. This is the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. So this is a drawing from the 14th century. But notice these domes would have been on top of it. This is very similar to the Dome of the Rock. You'd have domes.
Yeah.
So the churches had domes. Notice domes. So the style definitely would have had a dome on top. This is the design with the rock. Okay. So yeah, this is the north entrance, so on. I mean, very much the style of, the Dome of the Rock and the palm tree mosaic. This is the Muslim mosaic here. Right?
Yeah.
And the palm tree is very, very important within Islam. I mean, it's on the Saudi flags and things, the palm tree. And of course, it's within the Quranic stories about Mary. This is the design, a high quality shot here
Yeah.
of this. This is the north here. Right. So let's just run. Don't have that many slides, but notice this church in Bethlehem, it's not the Church of the Nativity, but it's the Church of the Shepherd. Notice it's also octagonal because it's to do with Mary. So that's really odd. This is a Christian design that the Dome of the Rock stole, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, the number 8 has got a number of significances. I don't want to anticipate anything you're about to say, but this might be part of the reason.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is to do with the resurrection, life after death. Another is martyrdom, and the other one is baptism. So I can, within that context of maybe resurrection, I can sort of perhaps at a push, I might say, well, it's to do with the saints and life after death, maybe, and maybe that could link with Mary, perhaps. Not sure.
To be honest, I don't know enough about the subject to comment at this point. I'm going to have to bring up another document, but later. So I'm going to try and run through this kind of fast. So the Theotokos, just so you know, it's the place where Mary supposedly rested on the road to Bethlehem. Now, of course, this is discussed in the Bible, but the proto-gospel of James, or the proto-evangelium of James, obviously is a source that discusses this in depth, right? And so and the whole story, the whole story around that, all of the, because the Bible mentions she rested, but all of the rest of the story, the embellishment, comes into these early stories, these early apocryphal stories, and of course these stories make their way directly into Islam. So
would that proto-gospel of James have been a Gnostic one, or just?
I believe so. I believe it is Gnostic.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, but I mean, we can always look that up. If someone in the comments wants to have a quick look for us, that'll be appreciated.
Yeah.
Actually, someone says, Adi says the rock must have been at the Kathisma Church, then it got destroyed and moved, and the rocks for the current location of the Dome of the Rock moved to the... Actually, no, the rock is still there, but a portion of the rock, they tried to move it to Constantinople or something, and they couldn't. So what they did was they put it somewhere else in Jerusalem, so it didn't get that far. But anywho, so the First Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, so this was when Mary was said to be the mother of God, because there was the whole idea of Nestor where Jesus wasn't fully God and so on. And when finally Jesus was said, look, Jesus is God, and therefore Mary was the mother of God, Mary was rose to importance, right? It settled a major theological controversy, right? That's one of the, and Juvenal was Bishop of Jerusalem. He was at the Ephesus Council, so it was important for them, and the church became extremely important. This church was on the same level as major diocesan churches in Constantinople, in Rome. It was not a minor location, it was a major location.
Yeah. So essentially this was, what's the word? Broadcasting a major doctrine for Christians, which is that that Mary wasn't just the mother of a man, but also the mother of God, in the sense that Jesus was both God and man, and that was something that they had to believe in. Yeah.
Yes. So this church was on the same footing with Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, and Antioch, the other major stations of the church. So this church was of major importance. It wasn't a minor location.
Yeah.
And then also this church is the source of various. So within the Jewish teaching, there was for 40 days after birth, the woman was considered unclean. She wasn't ritually clean. She couldn't enter the temple if she'd had a boy. So, but this eventually entered into the church as Candlemas, right? Became Christianized, shall we say? And what you have is so this idea of Candlemas starts. So this Jewish tradition enters into this church, and it says this becomes part of the church tradition or the Orthodox church tradition because of this specific church. Again, church that sources certain very important traditions within Christianity. So again, it's not a minor church. It's not a small innocuous little place. It's very important. Yeah.
Can I just throw something in? I just actually saw this 2 hours ago. I was looking at an old video by Odin, and he was recounting what Dr. Robert Kerr had to say about the word Umrah, right? And Umrah means in Aramaic, because it's an Aramaic borrowing, which Muslims obviously treat it as like a minor Hajj, but it literally means to live a monastic life. And Odin mentioned that Umrah has the sense of a dedication or consecration to the temple, right? So you mentioned there about the idea of Mary being dedicated to the temple, or words to that effect. So that has a connotation of Umrah. Do you follow what I mean?
Just say that again, please. Let me just try and follow you again.
So in the previous slide there, you had something about Mary going to the temple. You had the Candlemas. Where is it?
I can't introduce the candle procession to mark the purification of the third paragraph.
Yeah. And so it kind of marks the idea of Mary kind of being consecrated, in a sense, to the temple. Umrah has that connotation of consecration specifically to the temple. And it brings in other kind of concepts of Mary as the Ark of the Covenant because of carrying the Jesus within her. So Umrah might be a reference to this church, Kathisma Church. So this might be a missing piece here. We've got the Hajj, which would have been focused on the Temple Mount, and the Umrah is associated with that church at Cathisma.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, stick a pin in that. I need to have a look into that, see if there are any links or connections, words, phrases, practices, anything.
Yeah.
But that is interesting. So yeah, I mean, look, if it made its way from Judaism into Christianity, and I know there's people. I mean, I see this all the time, that everyone's trying to claim that oh man, just to go off topic. But first of all, I see Protestants, and look, I was raised in the Anglican Church, so I'm a Protestant like the rest of you. But I constantly see people making the claim that Catholicism is not Christianity, and I keep seeing that Catholicism started Islam. Please stop. Right?
Yeah.
So if it made its way into the practices of the church of that time, then there's no reason it didn't make its way into Islam.
Yeah, absolutely. The thought as well is that the further mosque that's referred to, or the place of prostration that's mentioned in the Quran, if the Temple Mount is the Masjid al-Haram, then another possibility is that the Cathisma might be the further mosque, the one that's...
that's an interesting thought. That's a very interesting thought, because it was a mosque at one time.
Yeah, it's just a thought now, just as I'm bouncing off your idea. So sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, that's interesting. No, look, I mean, this is how man, you never know what's going to spark an idea, because man, I've gone down a few rabbit holes and I've come up with gold.
Yeah.
So I don't dismiss ideas necessarily that easily, because you never know what you find if you look, because people don't look. I mean, and you ask questions and you spark associations. And also, of course, this place had a well, right?
Yeah.
It was called the Bir Kadismu, right? Kadismu or Kadismu. So it had a well, and it's been long known to have a well. Now it's odd that you've got a building with a rock and a well. I know of another place that has a rock and a well.
I just heard that place.
And then, of
Yeah.
course, hold on. There's something else. Didn't I just send you something? Yes, I did. Hold on. And let me actually bring this across. So few people might be aware of this, but now we're looking at the Kaaba here. I sent
Yeah.
you this yesterday, Mel.
That's right. Yeah.
They speak of, okay, another relic. This is at the Kaaba, is the Hijr Ibrahim, or the stone of Abraham, which is said was used as a scaffold by the patriarch, by Abraham, when constructing the temple with his son Ishmael. The third object of note is the fountain or well of ZamZam. So hold on, we know about the Kaaba, we know about the well of ZamZam, known called here ZimZim.
Yeah.
But why don't we know about the stone of Abraham that is at the Kaaba? That's also very, very odd. And they say the water gushed out miraculously from this spot as Hagar was wandering through the desert with her son, oppressed with thirst. Well, at the Cathisma, according to the legends, not the Bible, water
Yeah.
gushed out miraculously from this spot as Mary was wandering through the desert, because the biblical passage specifically refers to this place as desert. There is nothing here.
So
And then, of
we're
course,
seeing
yeah,
we're seeing a lovely example of Semitic symmetry here, where Hagar and Ishmael are being associated with Mary and Jesus here.
yeah.
You have that lovely symmetry, and they're kind of taking that story and applying it to a different context.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my thinking there as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, so now you've got the element of the rock, you've got the element of the well, you've got the element of the miraculous water, the trees, and all that. So it's just odd that, I mean, that this occurs here and then it's copied by the Muslims. And I mean, according to the scholarship I've seen, the idea that this originated in Arabia, no, this came from Jerusalem and was taken there,
Yeah.
right? And it was a church of great importance. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Okay, the water system, the well, was very well known as a holy site all the way up to the last century. Okay,
Yeah.
so, and this is the place here. That's Jerusalem in the background there. This is the view.
Mm.
This place has been leveled. Okay, the design is very much with the stone pillars of the Kaaba, of the Dome of the Rock, and all of that. This place is mentioned in two 6th century documents, right? So it's well
Yeah.
known.
Yeah.
And Theodosius, I don't know if this is the Emperor Theodosius who legalized Christianity, no, who made it the state religion, because in 313 Constantine legalized Christianity. It was Theodosius that made it the state religion of the
Yeah.
Roman Empire. So I don't know if it's the same Theodosius, but there was a monastery attached to this, and he was there as a young monk. So again, you've got famous names, famous figures associated with this place, right?
Yeah.
And also, um, I mean, it's just so they tried to have the rock moved to Constantinople. Now, why would you cut a piece of that rock and try to move it to the site of Constantinople, which is the Eastern Roman Church? Why would you do that if it's just a lame place that no one cares about? Again, it had to be important.
Yeah.
Makes sense, Mo?
It's the well. Obviously, they're treating that stone as a very important relic in connection with Mary. So it's like, what's the word? I think they call this type of relic first class relic.
Right.
Associated with a really important saint.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was placed in the Church of the Resurrection, right behind the tomb of Jesus, where it was used for the Eucharist. Does this tell you this is an insignificant item? No, this was
No.
clearly
No.
revered.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Understand? So all of this, when you take all of this together, this church was very, very important,
Yeah.
right? Now, the octagon shape of the church can be seen in other early churches, like St. Peter's House in Capernaum, Mount Gerizim. So the idea is there, the Dome of the Rock, but the Dome of the Rock comes late. Okay, as we all know, it's the oldest church in the world, right after the Kaaba. You know, so St. Peter's House, obviously, this is St. Peter's mother-in-law's house. Okay, the man was lowered through the roof here. This idea, right? But this house also happens to be octagonal, right? An
Oh.
octagon with a circle with a rock in the middle, as you can see,
Yeah.
with pillars. So obviously, this idea is obviously from a very Christian idea. Then it makes it into the Kathisma Church, and then it becomes common in other buildings, and the Dome of the Rock steals the idea. I mean, again, this is clearly a Christian idea that the Dome of the Rock steals. Why would they do that? Why would they take a Christian design now?
Well, it speaks to the idea that Islam has come from Christianity in some way, even if it's a kind of a hybrid between Judaism and Christianity. It's drawing from Christian traditions as much as Jewish traditions.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So let me continue here. I mean, you can see this is the Dome of the Rock. I mean, and also the idea of cisterns, water as well. This is so common here, and you have a cistern at the Kathisma, right? So the Cathisma well, they found a clay water pipe near the rock, and early tradition says a miraculous spring appeared there to quench Mary's thirst. And a 6th century account tells of pilgrims drinking sweet water, exactly like ZamZam. Pilgrims could remove up to 4 liters of water from the holy water well to take with them, exactly like ZamZam, right? So you've got to see this. I mean, so there's lots of papers on this I discovered. It took me a while, but so she's one of the original archaeologists who were there when the site was discovered. She went out and she had a look at it in 92, and she went back a couple of other times. So this is what Muslims do. So
I
now,
can imagine if they were setting up Mecca in the 8th century and they have this fantastic well in Jerusalem, they're going to want to have that in Mecca as well. They're going to have something on the level of that to kind of to make Mecca worth visiting.
yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. You've got these parallels here, and then it's copied into Mecca. So let me run through. Then of course you've got, so this thing is this. There's an Ottoman period, so it seems in the Ottoman period this was known. Okay, so there's some stuff related to that, and there's the water hole is still there. They dug it open and made it much bigger to do some research on it and for some archaeological research. And of course, notice here, according to tradition, the wise men also witnessed the star when they camped at the Kathisma well. Right.
Yeah.
So again, you've got another major issue around the nativity that is associated with this place, right?
Yeah.
So now, whether or not this was the original nativity shrine or whatever, but the fact is, you've got all of these connections. They cannot be coincidence. You've just got too many connections. It just was historically too important. They dug this open to start to look for archaeological stuff, and they found that this site was attracting attention all the way up into the Middle Ages, including the Ottoman period. So it wasn't left alone. It was well known and then disappeared.
Yeah, interesting.
Let's see. Okay, this Ramat Rachel also, it is part of an area that is very critical to the Old Testament. So you've got this mountain wall, and so this is part of the hill of Rachel from the Old Testament. So this area, it's also part of Jacob. So this whole place, the place where it's at, is related to Jacob and Rachel and so on. So it's very, very important to the Jews as well from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it is known as a martyrium, a witness to the faith. It was more than just a church. It's a martyrium, a structure intended to be a witness to the Christian faith by commemorating an event in the life of Christ, of a martyr or other holy person. The size is nearly the same size as the Dome of the Rock, built more than 230 years later. I mean, that was not a tiny church. Your thoughts, Mel?
Yeah, I think your case is really strong of a connection between the two. Like you could argue there are other churches around the world that are eight-sided at the time, but you have so many other things there that's connecting the two that you cannot just dismiss it. Yeah.
I mean, so what you've got is that it escaped destruction during the Persian and Islamic conquest of the 7th century, although apparently, remember, there was the one reference in 641, it was damaged, if not destroyed. There's a prayer niche facing Mecca that was used as a mosque in the 8th century. Mm-hmm. Experts speculate that this may have been one of the few churches that were shared by Christians and Muslims during the Arab period. And and let's see. So the clay water pipe, let's see, the Proto-Evangelion of James. This is well known. So obviously this now becomes an apocryphal story, which puts all these miraculous events that happen there. The Bible just mentions the following. And they came into the middle of the road, and Mary said to him, "Take me down off the ass, for that which is in me presses to come forth." And he took it down from off the ass and said to her, "Whither shall I lead thee, and cover thy disgrace? For the place is desert." Now, isn't that odd? Because, Hagar gets to a place that is desert.
Yes, yeah. And they're in a panic to get water.
Yes. What is the next verse after this? So, I should look at the next verse. Actually, it'll be very, I didn't put the biblical reference to this. Oh my good grief. That was weak of me. What is the next reference? Because we should look at the following verse and see what it says. That might be interesting. Can someone tell me what the next verse is? Let me actually you know what? I'm just going to look this up on Google quickly. I'm going to do a Mr. Google here.
Okay.
So
I think this is the
Proto-Evangelion.
This is
in the Proto-Evangelion. My bad. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and he found a cave there. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm just saying that like this part of the story here is the real clincher. The parallel is so strong between Ishmael and Hagar and Mary, looking for water at the well and so forth.
Okay, so let's have a look here. So for the place is desert, and he found a cave there and led her into it. So Mel, does that ring any bells? I mean, does that?
Are you suggesting a connection with the Hira cave?
I don't know, but
No.
it's just that, like, oh, here's a cave idea. Hey, we got a cave too. We need to stick a cave in somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just it seems like every little motif is being duplicated. Got a well, you got a cave. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is from the Proto-Evangelion of James, and then in this infancy narrative, Mary is the daughter of a wealthy but long childless couple. Okay. And this idea seems to be stolen after the story of Elkanah and Hannah and their son Samuel in 1 Samuel 1-2. Now,
Yeah.
if these stories can take from the Old Testament, then there's no reason that Islam couldn't take from these stories.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
The borrowing. And of course, Mary lives as a ward of the temple. There's other stories that Islam has taken as well. For instance, where a dove comes out, okay, where Mary is fed by birds. Now, there's this story as well from these stories, which Islam also takes over.
Yeah.
So this is just odd. I mean, it's really, really odd. And,
actually, just on that, Mary's a ward of the temple. I'm thinking about how the Quran connects Mary to the sister of Aaron, and a sister of Aaron being the priest. Priest works in the temple. A connection between Mary as ward of the temple would fit nicely with her being associated with the sister of Aaron. Another Semitic symmetry there.
So, I mean, this idea apparently, now Odon thinks that tradition of Mary as sister of Aaron was shared among early Aramaic Christians, right? Because let me see here. Let me just see what he says on this point. For Jewish Christians who lived by the tradition of the Torah and the Targumim, the Targums, there was an obvious analogy with Miriam, the prophet, okay, the prophetess, daughter of Imran, sister of Aaron, and Moses, right, whose prayer had God give the miracle of water to the people in the desert during the Exodus. Okay, the Jewish tradition about the wells of Mara and Elim in the Tosefta. Moreover, that miraculous water flowed from a miraculous rock that moved along with the people, which was identified with Jesus in the first century. As Paul explains in 1 Corinthians 10, I do not want to be unaware, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud. They passed through the sea. They were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. And they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. So there is this story, again, from the Jewish sources that the Muslims are probably copying.
And actually, Pseudo Jonathan mentions that story of Miriam's well as well, that link. So also Pseudo Jonathan suggests that the function of the well in Jewish thinking was that it proves the veracity of the prophets. It has that aspect, which obviously could have been very useful when they're trying to prove that Muhammad was a genuine prophet. You'd need a well that's plentiful with water to make that case, according to the Jewish thinking.
Yeah, so now you've got multiple sources. Now remember the idea of this church, the idea of Mary as the sister of Aaron, right? Obviously is associated with this location and with this church. I'm not saying the church pushed that idea. The church did not. Although some people I think have said that the church is the source of this and the church is pushing this whole apocryphal idea. But the idea from the Proto-Evangelion of James, and there's another apocryphal gospel that says similar things as well, that pushes these ideas. They associate themselves to this church, right? And the Muslims obviously are not using Orthodox Christianity, and therefore they are taking from these ideas, as I've got here. So I mean, so again, you've got another connection to this church, which is another connection of the Targums of all things as well. And this is now made its way into Islam. And notice, he's an old man and she's a young virgin. Now, hold on, let me think. Hold on, Mel, help me out here. Do you know of can you think of a religion? I'm just,
Yeah, I think I might have heard this every time I've ever visited Speaker's Corner. It's probably one of the top things Muslims say. Oh, well, Mary was like really young and Joseph was like 90-year-old.
Yeah, but hold on. Now, hold on. I'll put this to the audience. Am I making sense? I mean, all of these connections, literally over a dozen so far, not just 5, but we're talking multiples of solid historical connections.
Yeah.
I mean, this is making sense. And here you've got an old man with a young virgin, and here you've got a guy thinking, "Oh, that's some holy stuff over there. I need to be an old dude, and I need to get me a young virgin because that's what the Jews did."
Yeah.
Mal, I mean, I'm not saying Mo was necessarily, shall we say, mentally well balanced, but I mean, do you think they might have taken on this idea and said, "Okay, well, that's good stuff. We'll do the same."
Yeah, it looks like they're kind of almost gone wrong. But that story, we must include that one. That's a real story to remember. It does look like it's just being grabbed and saying, right, we'll have that. Especially
Yeah.
if they had a mosque there for goodness knows how long, a few centuries. Of course, they're going to imbibe all of the legends and stories and myths from that location and bring it into Islam.
Yeah, there's a
Especially,
question, well, was this a place for baptism? I don't know. I mean, we can guess, but I don't know for sure.
well, before Islam, definitely. Yeah, all churches would have been, mightn't have been its primary function, but definitely churches were all, well, can I say that? Maybe I might be wrong in the early centuries, but I think a lot of the churches would have had baptism.
Yeah.
I may
So, I mean, you've
stand
got
corrected.
all of these links. I mean, again, just back to this one. I mean, I need to probably include this story into the slideshow as well to talk about the mystical sort of connotation, or the old Jewish link to it as well. And then, of course, let me just finish up here. This is like only a couple of slides left.
Yeah.
They speak here of, so Jesus speaks from her tummy, and open from your roots a vein of water which has been hid in the earth. Here's the well, the original well, this little picture here.
Yeah.
And they began to come forth a spring of water, exceedingly clear and cool and sparkling. And they say the same thing about the ZamZam well,
Yeah.
right? So these ideas, I mean, many of these ideas, again, like you were talking about the late date of something, the earliest manuscript source is 820 AD. This is the Gospel of Pseudo Matthew. However, we know that these ideas were around at least in the 7th century and even much, much earlier.
Yeah.
So it's possible that you can't find any solid ideas, but you can find relationships to things much, much hundreds of years before.
Yeah.
And so again, you've got the very same ideas in the Gospel of Pseudo Matthew, which make their way into Islam, right? And in the Quran, she conceives him and withdrew to a remote place, and the throes of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She said, "Oh, would that I had died before this," right? And the Lord has provided a stream beneath thee, and shake towards you the trunk of the palm tree. It will drop thee fresh, ripe dates. And we saw at this church, they've got a palm tree heavy with dates. So eat and drink and cool the eye. If thou seest any mortal, say, surely I've blah, blah, blah. Hold on. Let me just go here. So let me just go back to the very first slide. Notice here again, I'm going to bring
Yes.
this up nice and big. This is the
Brilliant.
Islamic palm tree heavy with dates.
Yeah. It's
At this
pointing to
church.
that story.
At this church. Yes, sorry? Mel?
Yeah, it's definitely pointing to that specific story that you just read.
So yeah, so let me see. Let me just continue. So the Dome of the Rock. So there's lots of research on this. Okay. There's a month that the early Byzantine history of the road leading south loomed large as a holy itinerary. In fact, I mean, so what they're saying is here that the road Jerusalem to Bethlehem was a major route of pilgrimage, and you had to go past this church. The church is literally on the road.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, there's all of this solid archaeological, historical evidence. There's all of this stuff. There's no way to discount it. I mean, so this place was very important.
Yeah, just point out something from my knowledge of the Camino in Spain, which is another major pilgrimage route. The pilgrimage route was typically designed to go past all of the significant churches, and part of the pilgrim's task really was to visit each church on the way. So this makes perfect sense to me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair and well. So I mean, actually, I'm really glad we're having this. That's why I invited you the very first time, to talk, but you weren't able to make it. But
Yeah.
I mean, now suddenly you are filling in blanks. You're giving me confirmations.
Yeah.
That I'm not just
Well,
barking up the wrong tree here. There are too many. There are far too many of these things.
yeah.
And let's continue. We're nearly done. 1 or 2 slides. So Adam dug the well of ZamZam with his foot to provide water. No. No, there they found the well of ZamZam. Didn't have to dig anything. They found it by a miracle. But if it was just standing there and it was famous, why would they have to look for it and find it?
Yeah.
Hagar founded the well of ZamZam by watching from the hill of Asapha as a bird scratched the earth. Okay, fine and well.
Well, hold on. Just go back a second. Mount Safa is Mount Scopus in Jerusalem.
Yes, I know that, but no, yeah. But a bird was scratching the earth. I don't know what size this bird was. It must have been mighty big feet, right? Size 52 feet. In Mujahid's narrative, the angel Jibreel dug out the ZamZam well with his heel. In another story, an angel uses its wing. Then Abdul Muttalib rediscovers the well of ZamZam, but apparently, okay, it was never lost. It was the oldest city in the world. Okay, fine. And then the mother of Ismail, Hagar, hunts up Safa Hill. Okay, hold on. Notice here she ran up. Notice here she goes up Safa. Okay. Now in this one, she runs up Safa Hill and then to Marwa. And then she looks from Marwa and she sees an angel digging a hole in the ground. Now she's on the other hill. Right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, water pours forth from the ZamZam wellspring. This is not ascribed to an angel, but to the baby Ismail. I've got another story where an angel is literally digging a hole with the tip of its wing. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Do you know what would be interesting, actually? Yeah. If we were to bring up a map of Jerusalem with Mount Scopus and Mount Marwa or Mount Moriah, and see where the church is in relation to that, I bet you probably find that it's closer to the Temple Mount than it is to Safa, because Safa is sort of the northeast of the Temple Mount.
Hold on.
And if my geography is right, the Temple Mount, or sorry, the Kathisma Church would be southwest of the Temple Mount, so therefore it would be closer. So that story makes a lot of sense in the context of Jerusalem. And
okay, so let's actually do this. Since you're here, I mean, while you're here, do you think we should just do this quickly?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Yeah, because this could be great.
I have tried on Google Maps about 4 times to have this pin moved to here on Google Maps. I use Google Earth a lot, but on Google Maps, and they refuse to move the freaking pin. It annoys the living daylights out of me. Okay, so I'm going to call this one Cathisma.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to make this one. Okay, I'm just going to give it a rice, just so it's visible. Okay, just cool. Temporarily. So okay,
if you go, I think if you go north, let's predict this. I think it's northeast from there. You get the Temple Mount. Let's just see. Let's see, where is it?
Okay, so here we are, and then Temple Mount. So okay, I'm going to mark the Temple Mount.
Yeah. So I think the Temple Mount is between it and Mount Scopus. That's my view.
Okay, so I'm going to mark the Temple Mount now.
Oh, this is exciting. We're literally discovering things live here on air.
Sorry, so I need to...
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the Temple Mount marked now.
Okay. And then just sort of a little bit further northeast from there, you should have Mount Scopus, let's say.
Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Mount Scopus, here we come. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, this is going
okay. I'm going to drop it here. Okay, I'll just drop it there.
Yeah.
Oh, Mount Scopus. Yeah. Okay, close enough. And where is Mount? What's the other one? Mount Moriah.
Yeah, look at that. So as I it's still quite a bit out, but you can see that. So the top pen.
Sorry.
Top 10 is Mount Scopus, then it's the Temple Mount, and then down the bottom is Cathisma. So the Temple Mount will be closer to Cathisma than the other. Yeah, it's almost like a straight line between the three, if you notice.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Cathisma. What did I do earlier? I messed something up. Okay, Cathisma. That's crazy because now you have. I mean, from here.
Talking about 5 kilometers, something like that.
Well, looking at 5Ks, but if you continue this line,
probably another kilometer. Maybe.
What I wanted to draw was a line. Let me just do this.
This is brilliant.
I mean, 3 in a straight line. So I mean, that's what you've got. You just happen to have a.
Couldn't get a straighter line, like considering that's just kind of random, but it's very close to a straight line.
I mean, that's a pretty straight line running along the side of these things, like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, if you look here, you've got this one, then this one, then this one. This is definitely a very straight line. If I put my line, let me get my line again. Put it literally on target. So I'll place it here.
That looks pretty straight to me, doesn't it?
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. Just slightly off of the Temple Mount. But
it's close enough. It does cross the Temple Mount. It does cross the Temple Mount. Look at that.
Yeah. Amazing.
It crosses the temple. In fact, it bisects the Temple Mount corner to corner.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's actually bisecting it.
Yeah. And the Al-Aqsa Mosque would have been in that corner as well.
So I mean, this is a coincidence. I don't know, but
yeah. Actually, if you go back to that description, the very last one before we looked at, because if you kind of, okay, so it runs up, let's say, Ishmael runs up to the Safa hill, and then, no, what was it?
This one, the bottom one here, yeah.
And then up to Al Marwa, which would be Mount Moriah Hill, to look for help, but in vain. And that's where the ZamZam is seen. Okay, and then sees an angel. Now it's still 5 kilometers, but it's definitely from Al Marwa, which is Mount Moriah. It's definitely closer than Safa Hill.
So where's Mount Moriah?
So Mount Moriah is actually the Temple Mount, which is the central red one.
Okay. Okay. So that is Mount Moriah.
Yeah. So it's basically saying they went from the Mount Scopus, which is the top red one, then to the Temple Mount or Al Marwa.
So yeah,
now it's a bit of a distance to the well from there, but still, it's kind of, it makes logical sense.
I measured it before.
Logical sense. Yeah.
So yeah, but that's that's that. So then there are other stories as well. I mean, this is just a small selection. And then Ismail, his heel whacks the ground and brings up this thing.
Yeah. I just want to respond to just one comment here for a second. Is this channel an Islamic channel? No, we're just looking at the origins of Islam. We're not an Islamic channel.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you there.
So you would look over Jerusalem to Mount Scopus. From the church, you would look over Jerusalem to Mount Scopus. Well, that's probably true. Actually, let's go have a look. But then again, I mean, so let's have a look here. The road has always run in this direction. It's basically, here we are. Let's actually go stand in the road next to this place.
Yeah, that would be.
So here's the church on our right, literally next to the road.
Yeah.
And where would be?
So straight ahead, presumably, if it's in the right direction.
Yeah, on Google Maps you can zoom in. On Google Earth you can't. It moves you forward. If we do this, sorry, let me just go back here. It's slightly ahead to the left. Okay, so I need to go.
Yeah, on Google Earth you could create it like a 3D view, low to the ground, but.
So it's going to be slightly ahead to the left. So you can't see it, but it's going to be like roughly in this direction, here or here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty
cool. Because the church is right there. So yeah, I mean, so it's ahead roughly in this direction. You can't see it now, but yeah.
Yeah.
So then the final slide I have is so the Quran has it in 3 places: Surah 346, 5110, and 1922. Okay, so what is the relationship between the cave of Kathisma? And I need to bring up this last document here. I'll bring this up. I translated this from the Dutch. The Quran, Kathisma, and the child is spoke in the manger. All right.
Yeah.
And the clay bird thing is so attached to the mythical story. Okay, is the clay bird story, right? In Pseudo Matthew, because Pseudo Matthew also has elements of this story in it, and the Quran obviously copies Pseudo Matthew.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Pseudo Matthew and not Pseudo Jonathan. Good grief. Even the Proto-Evangelion of James both have this. The Church of Cathisma. Right. And of course, Mary becomes important because she gave birth to the Son of God. And then, of course, it says here that you've got the cave of treasures, and then the final conclusion. Let's just finish the conclusion. The Quran is linked to Assyrian, Palestinian, Christology, theology, or Christian theology centered around the Ark of the Covenant and the Cave of Treasures. The purpose of this theology was to emphasize the continuity of revelation, beginning with Adam and the prophets in the Old Testament through paradise and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Temple of Jerusalem to the Blessed Virgin, Theotokos, and the Ark of the Covenant. Now,
She's the new Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
She becomes the Ark of the Covenant. You see?
Yeah.
So she becomes, so hold on, it says this, let me see, sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, no. The Byzantine Church, to celebrate the status of the Virgin, during that feast, Mary assumes the role of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is embedded in the rock of the Kathisma in another legend, since then the Ark and the body of the Virgin are one.
That makes sense. That's another Semitic symmetry, bringing the two concepts together.
Now, remember I mentioned that on the stream when I mentioned you. I said the Semitic symmetry thing because it was making sense to me as well.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, this, again, I mean, there's just one coincidence after the next. This cannot be accidental.